Even once or twice it gratified one of the enumerated needs. It waits the chance to run off in that direction. It must further be added that although the coachman has a very feeble understanding of his duties, he can nevertheless, even though only a little, think logically. And remembering tomorrow, he either from fear of losing his job or from the desire of receiving a reward, does occasionally evince an interest in doing something or other for his employer without being driven to it. But the horse, in consequence of their not having been formed in it at the proper time, owing to the absence of any special and corresponding education, any data at all for manifesting the aspirations requisite for responsible existence, of course fails to understand, and indeed it cannot be expected that it should understand. Why, in general, it must do anything. Its obligations are therefore carried out quite inertly and only from fear of further beatings. As far as the carriage or cart is concerned, which stands in our analogy for the body, without any of the other independently formed parts of the common presence of a man, the situation is even worse. This cart, like most carts, is made of various materials and furthermore is of a very complicated construction. It was designed, as is evident to every sane-thinking man, to carry all kinds of burdens, and not for the purpose for which contemporary people employ it, that is, only for carrying passengers. The chief cause of the various misunderstandings connected with it springs from the fact that those who made the system of this cart intended it for travel on the by-roads, and certain inner details of its general construction were in consequence foreseeingly made to answer to this aim. For example, the principle of its greasing, one of the chief needs of a construction of such different materials, was so devised that the grease should spread over all the metallic parts from the shaking received from the jolts inevitable on such roads. Whereas now, this cart that was designed for traveling on the by-roads finds itself stationed on a rank in the city and traveling on smooth, level, asphalted roads. In the absence of any shocks whatsoever while going along such roads, no uniform greasing of all its parts occurs, and some of them consequently must inevitably rust and cease to fulfill the action intended for them. A cart goes easily, as a rule, if its moving parts are properly greased. With too little grease, these parts get heated and finally red hot, and thus the other parts get spoiled. On the other hand, if in some part there is too much grease, the general movement of the cart is impaired, and in either case it becomes more difficult for the horse to draw it. The contemporary coachman or cabby neither knows nor has any suspicion of the necessity of greasing the cart, and even if he does grease it, he does so without proper knowledge, only on hearsay, blindly following the directions of the first comer. That is why when this cart, now adapted more or less for travel on smooth roads, has for some reason or other to go along a by-road, something always happens to it. Either a nut gives way, or a bolt gets bent, or something or other gets loose. And after these attempts at traveling along such roads, the journey rarely ends without more or less considerable repairs. In any case, to make use of this cart for the purposes for which it was made is already impossible without risk. If repairs are begun, it is necessary to take the cart all to pieces, examine all its parts, and, as is done in such cases, kerosene them, clean them, and put them together again. And frequently it becomes clearly necessary, immediately and without fail, to change a part. This is all very well if it happens to be an inexpensive part, but it may turn out to be more costly than a new cart. And so, all that has been said about the separate parts of that organization of which, taken as a whole, a hackney carriage consists, can be fully applied also to the general organization of the common presence of a man. Owing to the absence among contemporary people of any knowledge and ability specially to prepare in a corresponding way the rising generation for responsible existence by educating all the separate parts composing their common presences, every person of today is a confused and extremely ludicrous something. That is to say, again using this example we have taken, a something resembling the following picture. A carriage, just out of the factory, made on the latest model, polished by German craftsmen from the town of Barmen, and harnessed to the kind of horse which is called in the locality named Transcaucasia a diglozidi. Di is a horse, digloz is the name of a certain Armenian specialist in buying utterly worthless horses and skinning them. On the box of this stylish carriage sits an unshaven, unkempt, sleepy coachman cabby, dressed in a shabby cloak which he has retrieved from the rubbish heap where it had been thrown as utterly worthless by the kitchen maid Maggie. On his head reposes a brand new top hat, an exact replica of Rockefeller's, and in his buttonhole there is displayed a giant chrysanthemum. This picture, however ludicrous, of contemporary man is an inevitable result chiefly because from the first day of the arising and formation of contemporary man, all these three parts formed in him, which parts, although diversely caused and with properties of diverse quality, should nevertheless, at the period of his responsible existence for pursuing a single aim, altogether represent his entire whole, begin, so to say, to live, and to become fixed in their specific manifestations separately one from another, never having been trained either to the requisite automatic reciprocal maintenance, reciprocal assistance, or to any, even though only approximate, reciprocal understanding. And thus, when afterwards concerted manifestations are required, these concerted manifestations do not appear. Thanks to what is called the system of education of the rising generation, which at the present time has already been completely fixed in the life of man, and which consists singly and solely in training the pupils by means of constant repetition to the point of madness, to sense various almost empty words and expressions, and to recognize only by the difference in their consonants the reality supposed to be signified by these words and expressions. The coachman is still able to explain after a fashion the various desires arising in him, but only to types similar to his own, outside of his common presence. And he is sometimes even able approximately to understand others. This coachman cabby of ours, gossiping with other coachmen while waiting for a fare, and sometimes, as is said, flirting at the gate of the neighbor's maid, even learns various forms of what is called amiability. He also, by the way, according to the external conditions of the life of coachmen in general, gradually automatizes himself to distinguish one street from the other, and to calculate, for instance, during repairs in some street, how to get to the required street from another direction. But as for the horse, although the maleficent invention of contemporary people, which is called education, does not extend over the horse's formation, and in consequence its inherited possibilities are not atrophied, yet owing to